Hello and welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews.
I see Rutger Hauer's name. I have to watch it.
And I'm Gary. And today we're going to review and discuss Flesh and Blood, which released in 1985. From writers Gerard Soterman and Paul Verhoeven, and directed by Paul Verhoeven. Iain, why don't you give us the synopsis?
Well, the time is 1501. The place is Western Europe. And a group of mercenaries have just taken over a town for a rich landowner. But the landowner doesn't want to give up his precious treasure, so he has the mercenaries forced out of his town. The leader of the group of mercenaries, Martin, played by Rutger Hauer, decides that he's going to lead his merry bunch of misfits up against the landowner. They end up kidnapping a princess, played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, and the two of them embark on a bit of a romantic adventure.
Let's see if this angel bleeds.
Well, this film has one of those production hell stories that has accompanied it.
Nice.
And I don't know whether that's one of the reasons why I'd never really heard of this film. Like, of course, Rutger Hauer, huge fan of him and of the director Paul Verhoeven, and usually go out of my way to see most of their films. However, I never really went and watched anything outside of their American-made films.
Right.
This is Paul Verhoeven's first American film.
Oh.
It was financed by Orion and by Spain and by the Netherlands.
Okay.
But it was majoritarily funded by Orion Studios. And Verhoeven's first American film.
Yeah.
And but Rutger Hauer didn't want to do this.
Oh.
He had already kind of signed up for it, but after having like more success in America as well, with Blade Runner and such, he didn't want to play this part in particular because, well, he's villainous, he's a rapist, he's a murderer, and he was like, I don't really want to play that type of part right now, like again.
Yeah.
But Verhoeven said, no, you're doing this film. And as a result, they had lots of clashes on set, lots of arguments. They swore at each other in their native language. And of course, the English and American crews were just like, we don't even know what they're saying.
Yeah.
We know that. Can you please start swearing at each other in English, please, so we know what you're saying? And they had to for the rest of the shoot. But yeah, it was not pleasant. Of course, a lot of the other sort of actors were like, we're going to go to Spain. We're going to shoot in Spain. It's going to be nice and warm.
Yeah.
And it rained, and it was snow, and there was sleet, and it was horrible, and it was cold. They were like, we're in the castle, and it's freezing.
Yeah.
So, and also, Paul Verhoeven decided for this film, I think I'll skip on storyboarding. And then when it came to shooting, it was like, well, we're just going to go with the flow. And then for the rest of the extras and cast, it became the film, they recalled it Flesh and Blood and Elbows, because all the actors were elbowing the others out of the shots and out of the frames so that they were more prominent in the film.
No way.
So, yeah, a lot of production woes. But I mean, this was like the fifth time Paul Verhoeven and Rutger Hauer had actually worked with each other, and the last time after everything that happened. It's kind of sad because he wanted Rutger Hauer to play Murphy in RoboCop. But after this film, like
I don't think that would have worked.
Yeah, but they'd worked on films such as Floris in 1969, Turkish Delight in 1973, Katie Tipple in 75, Soldier of Orange in 77, and then Spetters in 1980. So you'd think they would have kind of built from that, but yeah, the falling out here. Of course, before Rutger had passed, Verhoeven said they did kind of have some peace and made up afterwards. So it didn't end on bad terms, at least.
Well, saying that, with those movies that the two of them have worked on, how many of them have you seen?
None. I can say I've now seen every film that Rutger Hauer's been in, other than his original films.
I was going to say, because I actually do have a copy of Soldier in Orange at home that I've been building myself up to watch. Because obviously Paul Verhoeven, Rutger Hauer's name on it. And I'm just like, I, like you, see the names and think, oh my God, how have I not seen these? And then realize that actually there's a layer of dust on these movies because nobody has wanted to watch them because they're not really that great. You've got a great actor and you've got a great director, but sometimes these things don't actually mesh. And I said this to Gary before we turned the camera on. This movie, Flesh and Blood, is 2 hours long. And it could easily be 30 minutes shorter. It does feel to be all over the place with certain character developments, character arcs. Like we said, with Rutger Hauer's character, Martin, I honestly would have liked him to have been the kind of rogue throughout the movie instead of this bloodthirsty criminal that obviously that he is through the movie. And I did think it was interesting as well. I read in the notes that the writer for Berserk or Guts character, he based Guts on Martin from Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, I think that's awesome.
I think that's absolutely awesome as well, because people want to talk about anime as much and, oh, have you ever seen Berserk? I'm like, no, have you ever seen Flesh and Blood?
Right. And that's because, I mean, the world of Berserk is grim and dark and gritty and horrible, and you can't really trust anybody. And that is the world that this film kind of inhabits as well. It is, I think, an unflinching look at medieval times with no sugarcoating. It's a kind of, it is, I guess, like dialed up a little bit in parts to get the message across. Yeah. But it is not for everybody, I would say. I mean, it will depict rape and violence and gore. And like chances of survival are slim in medieval times, especially in this world.
Yeah. And we start off with them heading into this castle battle, and we're following Hawkwood, played by Jack Thompson, who is kind of the general or the guy in charge of this rabble army, I suppose. And they've been tasked with taking back this town by this rich landowner. And the rich landowner has his son, Stephen. Stephen, played by Tom Burlinson. He was a really good character to start off with. At the start of this movie, because he kind of likes the mercenaries. He wants to be working with them. He wants to be with the people instead of living up in the high towers.
No, fighting's for fools.
Yeah, his dad's like, no, you have to stay with us. And his dad wants the town back. And so he convinces Hawkwood and all the mercenaries that if they go in there and take the town back for him, they can...
loot for 24 hours.
Yeah, loot and pillage for 24 hours, as much gold and riches as they want. And so Martin and his whole crew, they're ready to go. You've got the likes of Bruno Kirby in there, who's a great actor. You got Brian James in there from Blade Runner as well, working with Rutger Hauer.
Yeah.
You've got Susan Tyrrell playing Celine, the pregnant, drunken...
Right.
I want to say whore, so I'm going to call her as I see her. She's a whore. She's a whore. Like, she admits she slept with Martin and possibly half the company. She's pretty certain the baby that she's got is Martin's baby, and he's happy to be the father, but actually tells her as well that, like, you know, he's probably going to be dead, so he doesn't really care.
That belly is getting really fat.
Yeah, you're the one who gave me this belly, Martin.
Yeah, me and the whole company.
Well, not me, Martin.
And they go in and they retake back the town, and it's filmed really, really well. You know, it's not overly gory. There's not lots of bloodshed and stuff, but between the screams, the shouting, the fire, this great castle set that they're utilizing as well, you get the idea that the mercs have gone in there and retaken the town.
Yeah, and again, it shows all of the carnage that's happening, and then as it's unfolding, the Baron's just like, yeah, I've changed my mind.
Yeah.
Hawkwood, if you could please get rid of the rabble out of my town and get rid of them, take all their weapons and take all their gold.
Yeah.
And he's just like, but you promised the men. He's like, I don't care what I promised, get them out of here.
Yeah.
And we just see them all being marched right back out of the town, like dropping all their weapons.
Well, it's a conflict, isn't it? Because Hawkwood doesn't want to do this because his...
loyalties to the men,
people, yeah. But he's also already signed off that he's got his own land, he's got his own house.
That's it.
And
he
he's
inadvertently injured Nun, and he's trying to patch her up, and now he's got his own land. He's like, I'm just going to look after her and take care of her. I've done my time.
Yeah, she had a gun.
Yeah.
The nun had a gun.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of, like, I think there's only another gun in the entire movie.
Yeah.
So the two guns, but I was just like, I don't know how historically accurate this is, but she tries to shoot at Hawkwood, and then he comes up and he catches her with his blade. She has a bit of brain damage or a head damage, and so Hawkwood is infused with guilt now to take care of this girl, and he's also got a bit of guilt from all of his rabble being obviously taken, you know, stripped of all their weapons, stripped of all their gold, which I was really surprised at, because I'm like, okay, Martin, where are we going now with your character? You know, you were the leader of these mercenaries and now you are unarmed. What's the plan? And so we cut to them like hiding out in some caves, aren't they? In the rain, and Celine gives birth.
That's right. and it's a stillbirth.
Yeah.
Which is rough, especially when you see that little hand. It's just like,
Oh, God,
man,
the effect of that baby. Jesus, man.
And so he's like, don't worry, I'll find something to bury it in. He's got this tiny little barrel.
Yeah, and he's kind of
He's
stuffing it into the barrel.
It's like, does it quite fit? And he's trying to gently put the hand in there.
Yeah.
And he just drops it in this muddy puddle.
Yeah.
And just steps on it as it fills with water as it sinks. But as that's sinking, something else starts rising up out of the earth. They find the statue of Saint Martin.
Yeah.
And the preacher, the cardinal there, played by Ronald Lacey, you'll recognise from Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
He's the one who's like, it's a sign. As one body goes into the ground, another arises. And
Yeah.
it's the sign. And it's also named Martin, like you. And
So we must follow Martin now because we've got Saint Martin.
And Martin's like, the statue sword is pointing that way. So that's the way we're going to go.
That's it, yeah. The cardinal proclaims that obviously if we follow Martin and Saint Martin, then we will be gifted riches and gold, and we'll get everything back that we were supposed to have. And Rutger Hauer's character Martin proclaims as well that yes, and we will also defeat the landowner for driving us out and killing the baby and stuff like that. And there was that. I thought it was an awesome image, but also horrible as well, where Celine kind of stumbled out of the cave, and she's got all this blood on her nether region area, but she's ready to go again. Yeah. Like you got
to be resilient or die in the medieval times.
Yeah. I was like, wow.
Well, this is going on as well. We do catch up with Agnes, who's played by Jennifer Jason Leigh, and her friend as they're on these carriages, and she's learning about, well, nature.
Yes.
Because she doesn't really know. She'd find out she's a virgin, and she's, I guess, betrothed to Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a shock because I heard the voice. I was like, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
It's like, it's Bart Simpson.
It's Bart Simpson. The lady in waiting that is working with Agnes. The actress playing her is the person who does the voice for Bart Simpson.
And so Agnes is like, so I don't really know what happens. I know you do. So I demand that you go and perform sex right now so I can watch from the bushes. And she's like, well, I don't really feel in the mood right now. She's like, do it.
Yeah.
Like, all right, well, I guess she's got a fiery side to her.
Yeah.
And she sits there behind the bushes watching Bart Simpson get railed.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Well, they start to have sex, and she starts to watch, and then she decides, well, I don't want to watch anymore. So she gets a piece of like grass or something and starts whipping the girl off the guy, like, hey, leave him alone. I gotta give it to Jennifer Jason Leigh. Like, I've watched a lot of her performances, and I've never seen this movie, and this was maybe our second, third, fourth.
She'd done Fast Times,
Yeah, she'd done Fast Times. So she was on the rise of being a really, really great actress. And here she is having to go up against Rutger Hauer, who out of probably everybody on set was probably the best well-acted person in the entirety of the movie. And so you can see why he clashed with Verhoeven. Because I said this to Gary, like, the pacing seems to be all over the place. The characters seem to be acting plot lines that don't really go anywhere, but then they seem to come back, and you're supposed to care, but you don't really know how you feel for the characters, because one moment you're backing the characters because they're anti-heroes, the next minute you're hating them because they're full-on fucking villains. Yeah. And so it was the same with Agnes's character. Like, I just wanted her to stay the virginal princess throughout the movie so that she was the damsel in distress.
Yeah. Well, going off on a tangent of what you said there about the film, this film's script was not the original intended shooting script.
Right.
It was vastly changed, whereas this whole love triangle, which will develop through the film between Martin, Agnes, and Stephen, was not the driving force of the original film. The original driving force was the strong friendship, which we see briefly between Martin and Stephen in the battle sequence. And then their betrayal after Arnolfini changes his mind about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then they have a falling out. And that was to be the rivalry. That was to be the crux of the film. But they were like, the studio was like, no, we need a love story, so let's change that and do that and that and that. And so that's why the film may feel a little bit muddled.
It does,
because it's not going for what it intended to. And of course, Paul Verhoeven also said he learned a valuable lesson when making this film, was that to never compromise with the producers on your story.
Yes.
Tell the story you want to make.
Oh, and storyboard shit.
Oh, yeah, maybe storyboard
shit. That's how he worked with RoboCop. A year later, he decides to do one of the greatest sci-fi movies of all time. But with this, Stephen is asked by his dad if he wants to go out on a hunting party, and as they're out hunting, they just happen to come across the caravan of Agnes and all of her friends. And Stephen realizes that Agnes is the girl that he's betrothed to, and so the two of them go riding off, and they come across those two hanged men hanging from the tree, and Agnes, she makes a statement to him. She actually calls him out, which I thought was great for Jennifer Jason Leigh. She says to him, like, I'm going to dig up the ground and find mandrake root, because it's supposedly it grows around dead people. And Stephen gives the insight that mandrake root, it grows from hanged dead bodies because the dead bodies come on the floor, and that's what makes the mandrake root. And so she picks it up and says, well, I've read as well that if two people who are supposed to love each other eat from this, they'll love each other forever. And he doesn't believe it at first. And she turns to him and says, well, you're supposed to be the scientist. You're supposed to be the thinker. I'm trying something and you're not going to. And so that kind of forces him. And I thought that was really great. I mean, the actor playing Stephen isn't as good as Jennifer Jason Leigh.
No.
Nowhere near. She controls this whole sequence. And it then gets to the point where her caravan is
Going
attacked.
past some preachers.
Some preachers
And
and pilgrims.
Arms for the poor,
Yeah.
arms for the poor. And then it turns out that it's our mercenary rabble
Yes.
that then springs this ambush on this caravan and loots all the gold and takes everything and rides off with it.
Yes.
And they, of course, only realise much later on that Agnes is kind of still in that caravan.
Yeah, they wound Stephen's dad as well. So now Stephen takes it upon himself that he has to not only rescue Agnes, but he has to get revenge for his dad. And they find Agnes in the back of this wagon. Martin and his crew are all there. They're dancing, they're drinking. And Martin says, right, no, we're all going to start wearing red. And so they all start putting on red. And they find Agnes in the back of the wagon, and she's imploring with them, like, please, no, don't do anything to me. My family are rich. No, take them home and all this. And it built up to Martin deciding that he's going to have sex with her. And that the rest of his group are going to hold Agnes while he takes her virginity. And I've seen a lot of things in my time. And one of the things I've never seen is Jennifer Jason Leigh being held by 5 people while Rutger Hauer comes up and decides that he's going to take her virginity. And it's not like it cuts away.
No. Well, I mean, the MPAA had lots to say about these sequences, and it was vastly cut for the American release, especially the European release. Fine, but yeah, it was like Paul Verhoeven knew it was going to be a troublesome shoot, and he said, unlike his experience later on with Basic Instinct, where it was like a closed set, just 1 or 2 people shooting these sequences.
Yeah.
He was like, in this sequence, you've got all these extras, you've got all the film crew there.
Yeah.
And he was like, bless Jennifer Jason Leigh, she had no problem with the nudity. She said her main problem was with how freezing bloody cold it was.
Yes.
And of course, but yeah, the uncomfortability of having so many people gawking at you while you do these sequences. But she said she felt at ease with Rutger and the cast. But yeah, still uncomfortable stuff to shoot.
Yeah.
But it is, I guess, it's not done in a super sexual way.
No, it's not.
And it does highlight. I mean, it's important because the sequence is important because there's a lot of psychological warfare happening as well as the physical stuff that's happening. Where it could be easily interpreted that she's enjoying being raped, but it's clearly not. Where she is having to use the situation that she is imitating what she saw happen earlier.
Yeah, she is imitating it.
To reverse the power, to give herself some power back and control, and also to try to, I guess, for her own survival, latch on to Martin because she was about to get passed around to the entire group. And because Martin then kind of has that connection with her, he kind of prevents and saves her from being absolutely wrecked here.
He does, and I will agree that the psychological aspect of the group comes in at this point, but she does start to slightly enjoy it. I think that's partly implied by the fact that Martin, everybody loves Martin. All the women love Martin. All the women have had their way with Martin at some point, and so he is like Robin Hood in this movie. He is like Don Juan. But he still needs to maintain control of his group, because I think you've got that one guy, Summer, I think he's called. He keeps appearing up, and he constantly, from this point on, is constantly trying to have his way with Agnes.
That's when Martin kicks the fire over and starts a huge fire, which causes a distraction.
He causes the fire. There's that point on the wagon just before they find the castle where he quickly turns the wagon.
Yeah.
So Summer ends up falling onto himself. And so he just keeps
Protecting her.
Yeah, protecting her.
Which is what she manipulated him to do.
But it's that point, I think it's Bruno Kirby who shouts the line like, haha, Martin's being raped by her, because she wraps her legs around him.
Yeah, she's fucking you now.
She's fucking you now, mate. And you've got that whole extra bit with Celine as well, where Celine, she really hates Agnes, because Agnes is young, she's pretty, she's got this body, everybody wants her as well. But I also like to feel like Susan Torero, who's playing Celine, is playing it as in she knows what Agnes has to go through, and doesn't think that Agnes is going to be able to do half the stuff that Celine's been able to do to keep up. There's that other woman as well. I didn't get her name, but she was happy just to sleep with so many people. She gets away at the end, sleeping with a bunch of soldiers.
Right, yeah.
It's like, bye, have fun.
But there's also, there's another mother there with her son, who's
God,
also privy to what was going on. The drummer boy, right? It's like, damn.
Yeah.
It's like, they don't care.
They don't care. Well, the mum's probably seen it. How has she got a drummer boy?
Yeah, right.
Where's his father?
Right.
But we follow Stephen and his father go and meet up with Hawkwood, and Hawkwood is working on his own little farm. He's just trying to live out his own little time, and Stephen comes to him and says, look, Hawkwood, I need your help. Your old crew of mercenaries have kidnapped my girlfriend, and you're going to come back and help me. And Hawkwood's just like, no, I've done my time. I don't need to come with you. And they force him.
Yeah, they're like, we'll take all this away from you. It's fine.
Yeah. I like that contraption that his dad was in, trying to hold him up,
the brace.
The brace. And, that there were like lots of little extra details to make you kind of fall in love with the history and what the film was trying to do. But at the same time, there's every now and again, there's a little twinge from a producer who kind of makes it Hollywoodized, don't they? And so the mercenary crew are making their way along in their caravan, and Saint Martin points towards this castle, and so they decide to go up. And Martin, Rutger Hauer, says, hey, that's where we're all going to live. And I'm like, okay.
Right, yeah. And it's pretty easy takings, actually.
Yeah,
they just rush right up to the gates and in they go.
Well, you have that moment where Martin and Agnes sneak into the chimney.
Yeah.
And they get spotted by a bunch of the people inside. So they fight their way all the way to the main gate, open up the main gate. The rest of the mercenaries all come rushing in. There's not even enough guards to take them on.
I honestly had a bit of a problem with this, battle sequence.
Yeah.
It literally felt like child's play. Like everyone just fake playing with swords. It just felt so unchoreographed and kind of tame. And I was like, I didn't buy it. I was like, this was just, I just didn't like the wide shot of everything happening. I was like, it didn't sell me on the idea of a battle, or this castle being sieged right now. It just didn't work.
It honestly felt to me like they had to shoehorn in this last set piece that they were going to be using, but they didn't know how. And so they just kind of shoved this in. I like the bit where I think it's the mum grabs the kid and she runs up to the battlements.
Yeah.
And Agnes tries to tell her to stop. We won't hurt you, even though everyone's being killed around them.
And she jumps.
Yeah. And the kid fucking survived.
For a while.
Well, no, yeah, definitely for a while, because she manages to drag herself to find Stephen and Hawkwood.
That's right, yeah.
And she's just like, devils in the night in our castle. And so they've realized that actually they have to go and investigate this castle now. And Martin and his crew have settled into this castle now, just kind of having fun, fucking around. But Martin decides that he's going to wear white now with Agnes. Yeah. Which completely goes against his instructions to the group. And so you watch the group kind of fracture a little bit more.
That's right, yeah. That's where it is now. Like, the majority of the rest of the film takes place here. Well, the whole rest of the film takes place here. Yeah. Which, for me, was a bit of a shame. I would have preferred them to have been on the road more. But it is a great location, real location. And, there's lots of sequences of them just sitting around drinking, yelling, and screaming at each other, and just being a family, I suppose. Whilst we have more, sequences of her flirting with Martin by using her foot under the table. We get sequences of them in the bathtub together, or the hot tub. Yeah.
Do you know, it was kind of cool, because I've played a lot of Red Dead Redemption 2, and so that's what this crew kind of felt like.
Yeah, a ragtag family. Yeah,
A
they
ragtag
survive
family
together.
of villains who are trying to be good and trying to survive
Well, I mean,
together.
they were mercenaries that were betrayed and now have been deemed outlaw. Well, I mean, they have become outlaws.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Because of their betrayal. Well, because they were betrayed, rather.
Well, that's it.
You know, so-
I think I would have preferred them to have not attacked this castle and hurt everybody inside, so that they could continue to be, the good guy
It's too cut and
mercenaries.
dry for what Verhoeven wants to say, because he wants to show a depiction of medieval times that is more realistic than a Hollywood Roman, like Robin Hood.
I get that, but like we said, the whole castle attack wasn't very good anyway.
It wasn't very good, no.
I would have rather if the focus had just stayed on the group. Like Gary said, watching them travel along, these roads, trying to avoid from trouble, trying to, get themselves involved with other mercenaries and killing them. I don't know, but it just, like you said, with this whole stuff at the castle now, we're watching the group fracture. And because I already know as well through Gary that there's kind of three different scripts all going on, because we've got the group fracturing, and so we're hoping that doesn't happen before the real villains turn up and decide that they're going to attack the castle. And Hawkwood has come across the girl, found out the information, and it turns out that the girl had plague. And so we watch him wipe his face with gunk.
Yeah.
And he now has the plague. And you have that moment with the apothecary doctor is deciding to bleed him. And Stephen says to him, like, no, don't do that. Do it this other way. The way that they do in the West Indies or whatnot. And the doctor's like, no, I'm not going to do it. That's blasphemous, blah, blah, blah. And actually what he's doing is killing Hawkwood sooner.
Yeah.
But the dog drinks the blood, and then the dog becomes infected with the plague as
That's
well.
right, yeah. Like the plague subplot gains momentum more and more as the film goes on, where it eventually becomes like the main thing.
Yeah.
It's that horrible sequence where you see Hawkwood sit up and he's got the blade and he starts lancing the boil as it pans up to his face. I'm like, it's gross. It's horrible. Yeah.
One of the most unbelievable factors of the entire movie happens now. I could not fucking believe that this happened. I was gaining momentum with the movie, and then Stephen decided that, I'm an inventor. I'm going to invent something that nobody has ever seen before, or will ever see ever again. But hey-ho, let's throw it all together. Let's get all of our wagons, take off the wheels, we'll get some wood, I'm assuming, from the woods nearby, and we're going to make a wooden tank.
With a giant ladder so we can get over to the battlements of the castle.
The ladder was the most amazing thing. Like I get he was messing around with gears and mechanisms and stuff at the beginning of the movie. But there is no fucking way in that fucking time period that that group of mercenaries got to see the guys working. Oh, what are they doing? I don't know. They must be doing something at night. And then this fucking tank thing. Where the hell did you get the nails?
Right.
Where
They
did you
start shooting at it with flaming arrows. Like, we can't even set it on fire.
I know. And then the thing stopped by the wall and the roof rotates.
Yeah.
Rotates. And then this ladder comes out, and it's not just a ladder. It's an extendable mechanized ladder that goes further and further up the battlements to the very roof of the castle, bypassing everybody underneath. And Stephen and his buddies are like, well, we're going to climb up this now.
And they start attacking.
Yeah.
But Martin's just like, well, I remember something that Stephen showed me earlier in the film. And there's this
bomb
barrel with this long fuse. And so he starts grabbing it and he wheelbarrows it all the way down there and lights the fuse and kaboom, giant explosion. I'm like, oh, he just killed Stephen.
Yeah.
But no, actually, he's still alive.
Stephen has kind of landed in, the stables, and they've captured him. And
I guess it's like
chain
prototype RoboCop here, right? When they start torturing him, shooting him in the hand with an arrow. They put a dog collar on him.
Like, that was there. I didn't like Stephen up to this point. So when he was getting tortured, I kind of felt like I should feel good that they're torturing him. But I didn't like the guys either.
Exactly, yeah.
And so part of me was just like, I'm trying to care.
Horrible people being horrible to horrible people.
Yeah,
So-
I wanted to care for Agnes, but as the movie had gone on, Agnes had weaned her way into Martin's good books that she was basically in love with him. There wasn't much notice in the film for me to say that actually she was properly just playing him. Like when I thought
It started that way, but then she does actually fall for him because he does reveal that he has good sides.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not black and white. It's all grey. This whole film is all grey in terms of morality.
Agnes even says to Martin at one point, like, you and Stephen are basically the same. And he's like, no, we're not. And she's like, yeah, you are. She doesn't really go into too much depth about it, but I'm like, I'm kind of in agreement with her.
She's only known Stephen for like 30 minutes.
Yeah, and there's that point from the castle just before they make the wooden tank that she looks down and she basically might as well have gone, I love you to him.
Right, because she throws her necklace inside a fruit, doesn't she?
Yeah, and she's like, oh, I still love you, Stephen. Come and rescue me while I fuck Martin.
Right. Yeah, she's using her body as a weapon.
Yeah, I suppose. Hawkwood at this point is starting to get over his plague and sees that the dog has become infected by the plague and decides to kill it, and then decides to take a catapult and fire the infected dog meat into the castle, which starts freaking everybody out. That they realize it's got the plague and stuff. And Martin's just like, no, we just got to get rid of all the meat and we just got to get rid of all of our clothes and we will be fine. And I was like, brilliant. He knows. He's smart. He's not fucking around. He knows that they can survive in this castle for ages. Stephen, however, finds a piece of dog meat and decides, well, I'm going to throw it in the water well. And he sees Agnes, and Agnes sees him, and he basically says to her, like, I'm going to throw it in there. And she goes, okay. And he does.
Yeah, and the next morning she pours everybody some fresh water from the well.
Yeah, well, he even says to her, doesn't he? He says, you've got a choice now to make. You either tell everybody what I've done and betray me, or betray them.
Yeah, and she just sits there watching all the water getting poured.
Yeah.
But as soon as it gets to Martin, though, she's like, no, don't drink that. And he's like, well, why not? Like, and then
the boy pours the jug and goes, look, there's the dog piece of meat in the water. And I'm like, okay, you didn't notice that when you poured the bucket into the jug?
But I think it's Celine, isn't it? Who's the first one to be like, oh, I'm tired.
Yeah, she
I was like, I don't think the plague works that fast.
No, she literally took a sip of water and then was like, nah, I'm dying. And so you realise that actually now everybody else is going to get killed off. The little drummer boy,
he's infected.
He's infected. He's going to die.
It's quite sad when he turns to Mum and he's just like, Mum, I don't want to die.
No, I felt bad for Bruno Kirby's character, Orlek, because as the movie had gone on, like, he'd killed the lady in waiting, Agnes's maid. He'd killed her, and I felt like he'd felt a bit guilty that he killed her. And then as the movie went on, you realise that actually he's playing like a bit of a gay relationship with this other actor.
That's right.
And that was no problem. It was kind of refreshing that actually they're not all just pining after women. The two of the men are actually trying to find some love there.
Yeah, actually, Paul Verhoeven said he thinks, like, of the whole film, the two of them are the only loyal couple in the entire film.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah, I felt that, because especially towards the end when Orlek is dying of the plague, the boyfriend has a chance to run away, and I think Orlek even tells him to go, and he decides that he's going to stay, because the main gates have been opened. All of the crew are starting to come in. Stephen has actually been released by Martin, because Martin and the whole gang had betrayed him because of Agnes, because of the poison water, and they've thrown Martin into the well.
That's right.
And Agnes, I was so surprised of Agnes that she turns on Stephen and Martin at this point and decides to go off with the crew.
Right, yeah. It's sort of like, okay, so the film's finally come back to where the original script was.
Yeah.
With now Steve and Martin both kind of in, like, dire situation. And he's like, well, I've got the key. I'll throw it up. And it lands on the side. And he's like, right now, how am I supposed to get the key? Yeah. And he ends up throwing the cross into the bucket. And the bucket drops into the well. And he manages to get up. And he's like, well, I've got the key. He's like, well, I'll get you in a minute. He goes around the corner. He's like, oh, the enemy here. And he closes up the gate. And he comes running back. And he runs off. And this sequence, like, again, like, it's just like, it's over the top. It's silly.
It's silly.
It's not scientifically accurate. But he's like, well, I can see there's a thunderstorm. Maybe I can get the lightning to hit the tree to break my chains. And he just gets electrocuted. And then the chains explode. You're like, oh, okay, he's free.
I was like, Steven's got to be fucking dead. Right. But he survived. And I was just like, all right, maybe I've given up now. I kind of want to see how it ends on Rutger Hauer's fucking behalf. And he does, Martin sees Celine die. And he's deciding to obviously try to get the crew together for one more escape. And the crew to start being taken out one by one. Like I said, Orlick, he dies, and then his boyfriend decides he's going to commit suicide with a sword, which I was really surprised about. Summer, who'd been kind of fighting with Martin, took a missile to the face from Stephen.
Yeah.
That was shocking.
Yeah.
And then Stephen and Martin have their final confrontation over Agnes. And they have the fight, and then the place is starting to burn down, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And as it accumulates, they have this final fight in the bathtub, and then Agnes smashes a bottle over Martin's head and drags Stephen back out. And as the two of them are trying to make their way back out of the building as it's burning down, they see Martin. And I thought it was kind of a cool visual, the red wine over his face, kind of looking like blood. He's looking all tired. He's, the place is burning around. He's lost everything again. And then the roof collapses, and you're like, oh no, Martin's dead. And at that point, I was like, oh man, you've killed him off. That fucking sucks.
Yeah.
But then when they get out of the castle, and Agnes and Stephen are kind of lovey-dovey again, which I'm like, Stephen, like, she's at least had sex with Martin like 5 times. I'd be a little bit careful, make her wash or something. She happens to look up, and she sees Martin climbing off the rooftop.
That's it, yeah. But she doesn't say anything to Stephen either. She's just like, what could have been?
Yeah,
and off she goes. Exactly, yeah. That end. Yeah. Yeah, well, I was kind of satisfied with that ending there. I was like, it had to end somehow, somewhere.
It did.
And the fact that the 3 mains are still all alive, I was like, well, that's good enough.
That says something about the
I hope they learned something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ian, what were your favourite scenes?
I don't know. Like, some of the visuals were really nice. Some of the countryside stuff looked really nice. Obviously, Paul Verhoeven encapsulated what he wanted Western Europe in the 15th century, whatever it is, to look like. And so the outside stuff looked really well. The inside stuff, I didn't really enjoy as much. It kept making me think of Howling 5, the castle in Howling 5, just the basics of rooms, and the basics of set pieces. Like, oh, here's a castle, but we're only going to show you like a couple of shots. We're not going to show you the grand battlements and this whole thing, because then if you see how big it is, you'll wonder how 9 people were able to hold it and take care of it. Rutger Hauer is absolutely brilliant. I loved most of the sequences with Jennifer Jason Leigh. Mm-hmm. I think I don't need to say which one. She is such a fabulous actress, and I've got to give her such credit at such a young age, with only a couple of performances underneath her belt, that she was like, yeah, I'll take my clothes off. And it didn't harm her career.
No, not at all.
The fact that she was brave enough and strong enough to take her clothes off, put them back on again, and go, I can do this all day. This is what we get paid for, but don't take the fucking piss.
Yeah.
She's a hell of a actress. I think the two of them worked really well. The sequences towards the end I did really like, with just the way that each one of the characters had an ending. Yes, Celine was a bit annoying at the start, but when she passes away towards the end with the plague, you kind of feel bad. Same as the drummer boy. He'd been there drumming along. Like the rape sequence, he was there giving us a fucking ambient music, wasn't it? That was weird. So yeah, those are some really cool sequences.
Yeah, just to carry on what you were saying, like some of the deaths of the mercenaries towards the end. It was like Brian James Carthan's when he gets impaled once, and he's still got his bow and he's still fighting and he's like, I'm holding them back, go, and then he gets impaled multiple more times. Like, oh,
that was great.
That was great. Yeah, he was like my favorite background character.
Yes,
that's only because I had the Blade Runner connection.
Yeah.
But I one of my favorite scenes, because it was I didn't realize that, like, obviously I've never seen the film before, but there was this comedy moment very early in the film. Steven's just like, hey, I've got this new invention. We're going to roll it up to the battlements and we'll blow up the gate. And he's like, volunteers, gold coin, here you go. Wheel it up. And guy's like halfway up there and he's like, I'll just light the fuse now, see what happens. And he's like, warning, it's going to... He kills the guy. I was like,
blows him up.
But I was like, well, at least it's set up for the payoff to be reused later on.
Yes.
But yeah, I was like, what kind? It was really funny.
Didn't they use like a really, really big barrel to lure the fucking mercenaries off?
Yeah.
And then when they shot it, it didn't do anything. It just crumbled. It was shit.
The lightning hitting the tree and Stephen being electrocuted. Yeah. It was great. Just hearing Nancy Cartwright's voice, like Bart Simpson. It's like, yeah, she was great. And her explaining, like, well, nature just takes over. That was a great little sequence. The frickin' stillbirth, like, it's not favourite, but memorable, It's a memorable moment that happens. It's grim. It's grim and dark. And yeah, I guess, as you've already mentioned it, all the scenes with Jennifer Jason Leigh and Rutger Hauer, they had real great chemistry together. All of the nuanced looks that they gave each other, they managed to portray that psychological warfare that was going on without saying anything. And that was what I really tuned into. I was like, this is really, really quite well done. Despite the fact that it wasn't the main thing that the film was going to be, it still came out really well in that regard. So yeah, those scenes were really good. Ian, do you recommend Flesh and Blood?
I want to say yes with Flesh and Blood, but this movie, I think you would consider it dated. You would consider that, because of the issues with the producers and the script, that it's really kind of difficult to follow and just stay entertained by it with the pacing that you've got from the movie. But then saying that, Rutger Hauer and Jennifer Jason Leigh are the two major reasons to watch this film. If you like them at all, particularly Rutger Hauer. I mean, we said this with Nighthawks, when we did Nighthawks. We'd never heard of it before, and he was outstanding in that. And he's outstanding in this. He's outstanding in pretty much every fucking film that he's ever in, even if it is absolute trash. This movie is not as bad as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, okay? But Buffy the Vampire Slayer is still really good because of Rutger Hauer, okay? And the same thing with this. I wish that they just kept him as like the lovable, roguish mercenary. Like, I wish he'd been Han Solo of the fucking 15th century in Western Europe. I wish like they hadn't tried to force so much emphasis on this sexual relationship with him and Jennifer Jason Leigh. But without Jennifer Jason Leigh and Rutger Hauer, this movie would not work at all. Nobody is as good as them to keep the camera focused on their story while you've got all this other stuff going on that really doesn't pay off. It does, but you watch them. So at the end of the movie, when she might as well be waving them on like, bye, and he's like, bye, see ya. You're just like, man, I wish I could see her naked again.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Flesh and Blood and will be recommending, especially for fans of both Rutger Hauer and Paul Verhoeven. This is an unflinching depiction of the medieval times where life was cheap, death and rape was commonplace, and survival was hard fought for. And Verhoeven fills the screen with all the violence and bloodshed with great impact, but also gives the film plenty of time for character introspection in a world without fantasy heroes. It's a fascinating exploration of humanity's capacity for savagery and compassion. Rutger Hauer and Jennifer Jason Leigh are fantastic here, and it really is their characters that drive this film along, and they do it effortlessly. It felt raw and nuanced and complex, and I was captivated by their characters. They had great chemistry between them. The music score by Basil Poldarus, it wasn't as epic as Conan the Barbarian, but it still added a layer of depth and emotion to the story, capturing the mood of each scene perfectly, really elevating every moment. So yeah, the film might not be for everyone. Yeah, it's a pretty brutal depiction, filled with cruelty and betrayals and nudity and blood, but it's expertly made, it's very entertaining, and at least worth a watch. A mirror of our time. Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.